Anxiety Encyclopedia question and answer number 4. Coming at you. Thank you all for all of your continued support. I've been steadily seeing the number of followers on my Instagram and subscribers on YouTube increase, and I cannot thank you guys enough for how much you have helped in doing that. As always, if you have your own questions, you can leave them down below if you're on YouTube, on the side if you're on Instagram, and I think also down below if you're on Facebook. Also, if you're looking for a quicker answer to your questions or want to directly talk to me anonymously, you can do so via Reddit on our Anxiety Encyclopedia. Link is down or up or on the side in the description. So this week's question comes from Phoenix on Instagram, and Phoenix asks, how does social anxiety come about and why? I wanted to answer this question because I know so many of us have issues with anxious symptoms in social situations, and so many of us worry about our interactions with other people, and so if we can find a way to remedy that or to recover from that, it would go a really long way to improve our quality of life. As I explained briefly in a previous video, and I plan to explain further in more videos, to understand anxiety fully, we have to split it into its component parts. There's a difference between the thoughts that pop into our head and the physical symptoms that we experience, as well as the behaviors that we do, like worrying. And to fully understand what social anxiety is, we have to understand each of those individual parts. If you want a little more of an in-depth discussion about these component parts, you can check out the previous video, which I will link right now. But to very quickly sum up, the two component parts that are most important for understanding social anxiety are, number 1, the physical symptoms. These are the symptoms that go through our body as a result of adrenaline. So when you think of butterflies in the stomach, or a sort of shaky voice, tense muscles, these are all things that arise from adrenaline. The second component is worrying, and this is our conscious response to thoughts that pop into our head. So, for example, if our unconscious brain makes a thought like, what if I embarrass myself in front of my coworkers? Or what if I say something awkward in front of my friends? It is this conscious response that makes up the other portion of social anxiety. So for example, choosing to worry about these thoughts, choosing to imagine scenarios in our head of what would happen if we embarrassed ourselves, and so on and so forth. One of the most important things to remember about these two components is that they are interlinked. More specifically, when we worry, it causes anxious symptoms. That is, just by asking ourselves questions like, well, what if I did embarrass myself in front of my coworkers? Or what would it look like if I said something awkward in front of my friends? By imagining things in this way, by sort of playing these negative daydreams in our head, we cause our body to create adrenaline, which results in these physical symptoms. The more we worry, the worse these symptoms become. So if we take someone who has social anxiety, what we see is that it's not as if their unconscious brain just reacts to social situations negatively. Rather, what's happening is this person is sort of negatively daydreaming. They are worrying about what will happen in these situations. And as a result of this negative daydreaming, their body is producing these physical symptoms in such situations. That all said, if I had to sum up social anxiety in one sentence, it would be, social anxiety is the repeated choice to worry about social situations, which causes anxious symptoms that we experience in those situations, or while we think about those situations, or before those situations. Knowing this, the path forward is actually really clear, because if we cut off our worrying in these social situations, then the symptoms themselves will go away as well. That is the reason that my book, and the vast majority of other books on the subject, focus on reducing the amount that we worry rather than trying to directly do anything with the symptoms. Because when we take care of one, the other goes away on its own. So, as always, we reach the point of the video where we ask the question, how do we stop worrying? Which is quite difficult and highly personal. As usual, I go into more detail in my book, which you can check out at any time, but if you're looking to get started on the process, the very simple first thing that you can do is to ask yourself why you are worrying. It seems really simple and maybe overly reductive, but when you start to become more mindful, when you start to more frequently ask yourself, why am I worrying? It becomes easier to understand the root thinking behind it, and thus it becomes easier to stop. There is a bit of a caveat to this, which is sometimes we worry even when it doesn't help us. We're consciously aware that worrying is getting us nowhere and it's making us uncomfortable, but we find it difficult to stop. So the question there is, why do we do that? And this is where looking at worrying as a behavior or as a habit becomes really, really productive, because we can understand it like all of the other unhealthy behaviors that we regularly engage in, even though we know it would be better if we didn't. For example, many of us choose not to exercise, even though we know it would benefit us. Many of us choose to eat junk food, even when it doesn't particularly make us happy. The reason that we engage in these behaviors is because our neuroplasticy brain has shaped around them. We have chosen several times to eat junk food, even when we knew it's not the best for us, or to stay home instead of exercising, even when we know it would be better if we exercised. And so our brain made it more comfortable to make that decision again. Worrying is quite the same. Many of us have chosen to worry even when we know it's not the best for us, and so our brain has shaped around doing it over and over again, even when it's not the healthiest or the most comfortable. Just like we can choose not to eat junk food and sit with the discomfort that makes us feel, or just like we can choose to ignore the urges that we have to stay in bed and instead choose to go and exercise, we can do the same thing with worrying. We can recognize the urge to worry when it comes up, but rather than actually worrying, we can shift our focus to something else. And while that may feel uncomfortable in the short term, the more we do it, the more comfortable we become without worrying. If you're looking for some of these attention-shifting techniques, as always, you can look at the previous video, or you can check out my book at any time. So, in conclusion, the more time we spend asking ourselves why we worry about social situations and choosing not to do so, the easier it will become to not worry in the future, leading all of the symptoms that we experience in social situations to decrease, and eventually causing our social anxiety to go away almost entirely. So, I hope that answers your question, Phoenix. If you or anyone else has any more questions about anxiety, feel free to leave them in the comments wherever this video is posted, or you can ask them anonymously on our Anxiety Encyclopedia, the link to which should be in the description of this video. Thank you guys for another great round of questions. I will see you in the next video.